Good morning, everyone. I thought on this cool, beautiful October morning that I would discuss and answer some questions that you guys have overwhelmingly presented to me here recently, and that is related to my terracotta pots and how I overwinter them, if I leave them out year-round, how I protect them. So I thought I would go over 5 things you can do to protect your terracotta over the winter. Now, I have a variety of different kinds of pots. My exceptionally large pots tend to be concrete, and I've had them for as many as, I would say, 20 years, if not more. They are very enduring, and I use lots of them. But I also use a good number of faux terracotta, and I have those scattered about the garden, and I have talked about aging those in the past to look like real terracotta. So there are 2 right there you can see. Now, my real terracotta, you know, terracotta can be something of an investment, and we do want to protect our investment to the same extent possible. So the first thing you can do is use some kind of sealant on the inside and or the outside. Now, I typically don't do that because I have not had that much of a problem with flaking and cracking in the wintertime on my large pots. So I think, so I don't use a sealant, but I will put a link to a popular one in the description below. So that's one thing that you can do. That said, again, I just typically do not do that because I don't have that much of a problem. But bear in mind that I live in a Zone 7 garden, so I think it's really important that you know exactly what your conditions are and how cold your zone gets. So if number 1 would be to apply a sealant, number 2 would be to just try faux terracotta. That's much lighter. It can be moved in and around, and obviously it is good for pretty much almost any zone. Now, that said, some tend to be frost proof and some are said to be freeze proof. So that might be something that you want to be attentive to when you purchase a pot, because those 2 can be pricey. Now, the other thing that I do on my large pots, which do stay out year-round. So, for example, this large terracotta pot here with a boxwood ball in the middle, it will stay out year-round. And notice that I have it elevated on pot feet. And my large terracotta pots, as a rule, are elevated on pot feet or stone or brick or something. I like that because not only does it lend importance to the planter itself, but then if it rains or snows or whatever in the in the wintertime, then those pots will not freeze to the surface, to the step or to the ground, and when you try then to move them, they can sometimes crack. So elevating them really works brilliantly. Now, if you live in an especially cold zone, which I do not, but if you did, then I would heartily recommend that you try wrapping them. Some people wrap them in bubble wrap or burlap, or they use chicken wire, and then they fill the chicken wire cages with some kind of insulation, and that is also an option. Again, I don't have to do that, but that is a way that your larger, heavier pots, for example, if these concrete pots that have these boxwood topiaries in them were terracotta, then if I lived in a colder zone, I would probably wrap them. Because when it rains or when there's moisture, obviously that moisture in the pots expands and contracts, freezes and thaws, and then that can create some problems. So the porosity of the terracotta pots in general is what makes them prone to cracking and freezing. These brown, they look like Italian clay, but those are actually faux material, and those stay out year round, and obviously I don't worry about them at all. Now, excuse me, over in the distance you can see next to my gate that I have lots of smaller terracotta pots here. Right now they are nested, they are stacked within one another, and definitely that is not a good thing in the winter time. It is best to store them upside down, not nested, so that they don't freeze and then crack when you try to separate them. Now, while I may not want to nest my pots, I will very much nestle them together. And that's what I do with my smaller terracotta pots, like all of these. And I will link to a video that I did for Southern Living on all of these small boxwood topiary. My myrtle topiaries and those, my scented geraniums, those that are not frost hardy, those all have to come in. But these smaller boxwood can handle the cold weather. And typically what I do is I nestle them all together, huddled together, behind the stone of this little fireplace here. And they are nestled against one another, huddled together, keeping each other warm. And then I blow lots of leaves amongst the foliage and the pots themselves, so that it's like they're just nestled together under a blanket of leaves. And that for me works brilliantly. Anything else that can handle frost, I might nestle along with them. And those smaller pots I can then leave outside. Now, another trick, this is a shrimp plant here, and you'll notice that it is just sitting inside a terracotta pot. So often for plants that need to come in, topiaries that need to come in, I will plant them in just a plastic liner, which then I will set into the terracotta pot. And then when it gets to be too cold to leave them outside anymore, I can lift them out of that terracotta, bring the terracotta in, and put the plant into the greenhouse. So those would be my tips in summary on how to overwinter your terracotta pots. Number one, you can seal them. I'll put a link below. Number two, you can try using faux terracotta or a faux pot. Number three, elevate them on pot feet or something, stones or bricks. Number four, you can wrap them in bubble wrap or burlap or chicken wire. And then finally, number five, don't nest them, but nestle them. And then obviously you can also use other alternatives. You can use concrete. And there are so many really good looking faux materials right now that come pre-aged or that you can age yourself. And I will try to remember to put a link to that as well. Let me show you an example of a plastic pot that kind of looked like stone, and I aged it. So there's all sorts of ways that you can simulate the look, but if you want the real thing, there are my tips on overwintering your terracotta.